Let's talk about the most expensive thing happening in your business that nobody's naming. It's not your lead count, it's the deals you already have that are dying before they close. Record cancellation rates right now, 1 in 7. You did all the work and you watched the check disappear. So here's the real conversation. How do the best agents keep a deal alive when the buyer's getting cold feet?
Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS authentic real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to do a crash course on not ever having to necessarily learn how to save a deal. We're going to learn how to make it so that you never actually have to worry about needing it to be saved. And that's what today's show is all going to be focused on. So here's an unfortunate truth. And there is a record number of houses that are in contract that fall out of contract. And I'm going to ask Julie, we're going to start it by asking and answering a question. All right. So Julie, do you think most of let's just focus on buyers for a second. Do you think most of the buyers that are backing out on contracts are doing it because of market uncertainty or because of lack of agent skill?
I think it's lack of agent skill. There's always market uncertainty. I don't care what kind of market you're in. There's somebody's uncertain about something.
That's definitely true. But what's also interesting is that when you read agent forums and you talk to agents in general, they're not going to say my deal fell out apart because of my lack of skill. They're going to say they fell out because the buyer fill in the blank, was worried about this, worried about that, worried about the other thing.
Or worse, they'll say the buyer was flaky or whatever.
Yeah, or they'll blame the lender, all these things. And you know what? To an extent, all those things are true. Those are all legitimate reasons why a buyer may have gotten cold feet. But we're here to tell you that, and this is true for buyers and sellers, where you started the actual process of preparing the seller or the buyer for the actual, in this market, closing and all the stress that goes along with it, where you started that conversation with them matters more than you possibly can imagine. And we're here to tell you, you need to start preparing all your real estate clients for the realities of the market on your initial contact. And we're going to do our best in the time we have with you today to explain all this to you. But I also want to remind all of you that if you are not a subscriber to our newsletter, harrisrealestatedaily.com, make sure you do subscribe. That's where the long form notes from today's show are. So just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. All right, so let's go, and I'm going to start it by focusing on what we call our 7-step listing process. So the first step in the 7-step listing process is the proactive lead generation. We're going to set that aside for now. The next step after that is the seller pre-qualification if you're prospecting for listing opportunities, but or there's the buyer pre-qualification as well. That word pre-qualification is something a lot of people use. A lot of coaches and gurus will use exhaustively, but they don't actually teach you guys how to do it. And you've never actually really been, I would say, pressed to know the importance of knowing every single little detail about what is motivating your buyers and your sellers, or frankly, what might cause them to not be able to transact despite their level of motivation. Does that make sense, Julie?
It does. After all, you can be really motivated, but not qualified.
Yeah.
And you could be super qualified, but also not motivated. So
Right.
It's a little confusing.
Yeah, it is a little confusing, and it is interesting so let's start out by asking some basic questions. Mm-hmm. And we're going to flip back and forth talking about buyer seller pre-qualification, but the answer is, the emotional response is still always the same. So Julie, why don't agents thoroughly pre-qualify a new lead when it shows up in their life, or rather a new person when they show up in their life wanting to become a lead? Why don't agents actually thoroughly pre-qualify?
I believe that several things, but predominantly because they want the lead to be a great lead more than they want to potentially find out that it's not. In other words, the assumption is they're going to transact with you, and you just kind of hope that they are good for it. It's hard to explain because it's so far out of my natural wheelhouse, having taught this forever, to think that way. But I think that they just want to believe that every lead is a good lead. And they're afraid to hear no, because when you hear no, it means you have to get back to lead follow-up and prospecting, and who wants to do that?
That's the
Everyone's
answer I was just writing down. But that is
yeah,
the answer, right? It's because if you pre-qualify somebody and you now determine that they don't answer all the questions to the standard in which you now are about to learn, that means they're not really a lead. They're more of just somebody that maybe someday, hopefully, when the pigs learn to fly, that they're going to,
they're a
be
contact.
yeah, they're a contact. That is, it's somebody you can put it in your CRM, but beyond that, you shouldn't be spending any time with them because they don't qualify. So when we say qualify, and again, I'm going to flip back and forth, and I'll do my best to remember to tell you guys when I'm flipping back and forth. But like for example, when you're pre-qualifying a seller lead, Julie, what are the absolute most important things that an agent must know prior to going on, really even prior to setting the appointment, let alone prior to going on the listing appointment in the first place?
Sure. Okay. Well, you put me on the spot, so hopefully I
I'm
remember
doing
all
my
of them.
best.
It's okay.
I'm going to keep you
So,
dancing.
well, you want to know what's their motivation to move and does it make sense? Are they a have to sell seller or are they just a want to possibly might want to sell seller? So what is the motivation? And along with motivation comes time frame.
Well, go slower because
Sorry.
motivation is the most important thing.
Yes, that's why I
So,
lead with that.
so if you're going to say motivation, you're going to want to know, like Julie's just saying motivation, she's going on to her next point, and it's because, she knows we have limited time. But I really, if all she'd said was motivation and there was no secondary point, that would have been all the information you guys need because
Yeah.
the motivation of the seller, and she mentioned time frame, but it even goes beyond that. So how do you ask that? So Mr. Seller, ideally, how soon do you want this property sold? And then listen to what they say. And what you're looking for, and what's really important that you remember, is that when you're choosing what types of if you're choosing buyers or sellers to work with, let's just say you have to choose where you're going to put your primary focus, your best energies every day. You always focus on sellers. Julie, why is that true?
Well, for one thing, sellers don't have to qualify to sell in the same way that a buyer does. So you're looking for sellers because there are people who have to sell. They have to transact. Somebody is going to list it and it is going to sell. It's a more definitive thing. It's more predictable. It's more duplicatable. You can almost take it to the bank, assuming that you don't screw it up, versus buyers who have
Well,
many reasons that they will not potentially transact.
Well, so let's stay on sellers. Okay. So you have, let's talk about a seller. There's no such thing as a buyer that has to buy. There always will be buyers that will have a lot of motivation, but at the end of the day, they can stay renting. They can stay in their parents' basement. They can stay in their current house and just do an addition or just do nothing at all. And if you put all your energies towards those types of folks, which most of you are doing, no wonder you're frustrated in real estate because you're trying to spend a lot of money and time trying to get people that ultimately are never going to be a 10 out of 10 motivated to be motivated. Whereas on a seller side, there are sellers that absolutely positively have to sell. For example, Julie.
Well, for example, a relocation.
Yep.
For example, a divorce. Sometimes a death in the case of probate, something like that. They can't make the payment, some kind of financial stress, or they become in a situation they don't want to make the payment for whatever reason. There's a have to situation. In other words, it's no longer up to them, and something bad could happen if they don't sell.
In addition to that, you'll have people that might, Julie danced around it a bit, but you'll have people that can't own two homes at once. Maybe they're in contract on
Financial,
some
yeah.
new financial, right? So if you write down a list of the types of leads that you would rather be working with, would you rather work with a seller that absolutely positively has to sell? So, Mr. Seller, ideally, how soon do you need this property sold? Well, I have to have this home sold in 6 months. 6 months? Wow. What's the urgency or what's the motivation, Mr. Seller? Just use the word. And they'll say, well, it's because I just got a relocation and I'm supposed to be out in Nevada, by 6 months from now. Okay, well, that gives us enough time, I think, to get the home sold. In this market, it's taking about 3 to 4 months to find a buyer and to close on the property. And then you got their motivation. You know what their whole time frame is. You know exactly what their reasoning for wanting to sell is. They have to relocate. They have to be sold within 6 months. If you wanted to have even more information on their relocation, say, Mr. Seller, just so I'm clear, you have to be moved and settled into your new home in 6 months, or or you're loading the boxes in 6 months. So which is most important to you? Well, I have to be moved and settled, and kids have to be in new schools and the whole. All right. So that puts us in a situation where, Mr. Seller, we don't actually have 6 months to sell the house. We have realistically 90 to 120 days. And can I tell you why? And then you're going to tell them about the 90 days to find the buyer, maybe 120 days to find the buyer. and then 30 to 45 days to close the transaction. You know your own market statistics, but you guys get what I'm getting at there. So that's the reason that motivation matters more than you can possibly imagine. Now I'm going to give you guys some advanced coaching here. If you get a seller that's wishy-washy about telling you what their motivation is, oh, this or that or the other thing, and sometimes they're going to be like that. I'm going to give you a little, again, as promised, advanced coaching here. The ones that are the most motivated oftentimes will be the ones that are going to try to play their cards close to their chests about what their motivation is, because their motivation, something external, usually a financial problem, maybe it's a divorce or something like that, is causing them to sell the house and they just aren't ready to tell you yet. So when you get somebody that's wishy-washy on motivation, here's what you say. So, Mr. Seller, I understand the fact that there's not a clear timeline from when you want to sell the property, but let me ask you a real quick question just so we're on the same page. If I pop by your home later today with a buyer, and the buyer has 3 kids and 2 dogs and I don't even know what, a show rooster, right? I don't know. Okay. They want to be in the house, and they want to be in your house the next 30 days or less, maybe 60 days or less. I mean, the show rooster is going to have to break up with its current. Where do roosters live? They live in
Outside.
coops, right?
Let's,
I don't know.
yes, in
I don't know.
coops.
Okay.
You have Texas on your mind, I think.
I do. I've been thinking about, you're right. Well, it's because I'm noticing that we're getting texts from the guy taking care of our ranch in Texas
Yes,
about the
that's
property
right.
needing work.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it stole my thoughts. Yes, you're right. All right. So now you got me distracted. I'm thinking about fences. All right. So
If I were to bring you somebody that's
oh,
motivated and
thank you. Yeah.
qualified.
So if
Yeah.
I bring you somebody that's motivated, qualified, and they've got the 3 kids, the show rooster, and 2 dogs and 14 donkeys, did I forget to mention that? But they wanted to be in the house the next 60 days or less. Mr. Seller, would that create a problem for you? Or could they just move in with you and maybe just be roommates? So make it into a bit of a joke. And the seller, so the seller's going to say, well, no, that wouldn't be a problem for me. I could be out in 60 days. Okay, great. So assuming these people were to want to purchase your property, where were you going next? And then you're going to find out, well, I've already got a place in Florida. Oh, Florida, that's exciting. So when you say you've already got a place, I mean, it's being built or you already own it, or I already own it. All right, that works out perfectly. So just so that I'm clear, you have another property to move to. So if we were to find a buyer that wants to close on this property quick, and it happens in 30 days, you mentioned 6 months or a year. You said you didn't really have a time frame, but the sooner the better, assuming all the numbers make sense, correct? The seller's going to say yes. Now you got motivation. Now you know where they're going to go. And you could even ask another question. These are all in our scripts, by the way. Just so I'm clear, Mr. Seller. Ideally, though, how soon would you like this property sold? I know before you said you were kind of open-ended, but ideally, when would it really work out? I mean, you don't want to be moving over the holidays, do you? And now you're going to really focus them in on what their time frame is. Now that you have that, do you guys understand how that is the most important thing when you're dealing with the pre-qualification of a seller? Then you get into our other seller pre-qualifications where you're going to ask about what they owe on the property. You're going to ask, you always got to dig down too, because people got all kinds of funky loans in their houses. They could have mechanics liens, first mortgages, second mortgages. You got to really dig. Of course, half of them out there, half the houses out there, almost half are paid for. So you're going to be dealing with an all cash seller. But beyond that, the next section is on the pre-qualification script. You're starting to ask about what they think the property is worth. But this podcast today isn't about seller pre-qualification. It's about making sure that you've established early on in the relationship through the pre-qualification process that it's a little bit sketchy out there right now, because there is a fair amount of uncertainty. And so you're going to have to prepare the seller, just staying with sellers, to anticipate that even after we get in a contract, that you're going to have a seller or a buyer that's probably going to have a little bit of buyer's remorse like the second they sign the contract. And we need to tread lightly with that potential buyer all the way through the process, because they might, if we come back too hardcore on our response to unsatisfactory conditions from the property inspection, that might just be the impetus for them wanting to cancel the contract. You guys following me on all this? So if you're waiting for the problems to happen because you haven't seeded the relationship early on enough when you initially had that contact with the seller, that the process is not just aim, shoot, aim, fire, shoot. You guys get my point, right? It's not just like aiming the bow right at the arrow at the target and hitting it every time. It's going to meander around, and maybe it's going to hit the ground, and maybe it's going to hit a tree. And that's the skill set that are going to have to bring to these relationships. And it starts out by letting the sellers know that, look, interest rates go up, interest rates go down. We have to be anticipating that we're going to be dealing with a buyer that might be asking for closing costs, might be asking for discount points. You following me on all this? This is new stuff for a lot of you guys. Don't be intimidated by it, because here's the thing. Knowledge equals confidence, right? So when you have this knowledge, and you can learn more about it in Premier Coaching, obviously, but when you have knowledge, you're going to be confident. You're going to have a skill set that your competitors won't have. And that's the very definition of an unfair advantage in this marketplace. Julie, what are you thinking?
Well, I was thinking that you just pretty much defined the difference between a seller's market and a buyer's market.
Yep.
When you had 10 offers, you could kind of treat buyers, if we're being honest, kind of not great. You would be like, no, you don't get an inspection, or you can have an inspection, but we're not going to fix anything. And you know what? If you have a problem with that, we'll just take the backup offer. That's a seller's market. The seller has the control. A balanced market, a lot of you are in that, where there's a give and take. You're just not used to the give and take. That's why some of you still think that an offer that's $5,000 less than your list price is some lowball. It's not. It's just there's a give and take. And so in some markets, the power swings to the buyer, to Tim's role play there. Okay. So we have to anticipate that there's going to be some hiccups probably with the inspection. They might, they might be stretching a little bit with their down payment, plus having to think about these repairs. We want to go with kit gloves. This is the one buyer that we've got. We don't have any backup offers. We didn't. They were the last showing, the only showing we had in the past 30 days. We want to treat them nicely and work with them. That doesn't mean you have to give them the farm and your show rooster. It just means that you have to ebb and flow. And that's weird for some of you guys. The other thing I was thinking about, Tim, again, talking about a shifting market and maybe why a lot of deals, 1 in 7 deals are falling apart right now, is because you have to be much more cognizant of each step in the road that can wreck a deal. Financing, inspections, appraisals, and contingencies. Some of you are dealing with home sale contingencies you've never seen before and don't know necessarily how to handle it. I wonder how many deals are falling apart because the old house didn't sell, right? So there's lots of different factors.
That's part of pre-qualifying, right?
Part of pre-qualifying, exactly. And all roads lead back to pre-qualifying.
Well, it's because if you're on the seller side again and you've got an offer from a buyer's agent, everything looks fantastic, great lender's letter. And by the way, if you're, you know what, Julie, we need to write this on our list of things to do. We need to update the ultimate
addendum.
Yeah, write that down so we can,
Yep,
we
I did.
can update that one. A good girl. All right. Yeah. So the ultimate addendum is, for example, something that you can use that will save. No, again, it was originally written. I'll tell you guys the story. So we had, I think it was 4 or 6 transactions deep. One buyer buying the next house that was, all these things are like dominoes. Yep. And so we had, I think Julie and I had, it was a 4 or 6 transaction deep deal. And I think we had 2 or 3 of the deals, something like that. Mm-hmm. And so one of the transactions was, and these were all great houses, but enormous amount of money, especially for us at the time, if all of them closed. So we get an offer on one of these properties, and the offer came in, great offer, great agent, great lender's letter. Everything was perfect. It's like, whoo, our bacon is saved. And those, actually, I'm starting to remember all the details of this now.
I remember it very
it's crazy.
vividly.
That's so long ago, and I can't believe I'm starting to actually remember.
It was very stressful at the time.
The house was in Westerville. I remember that.
Yes,
and
it was
like a little, yeah. So we've done thousands of deals, and these are the ones that stand out the most, Anyway, those people were buying something that we had for sale, and the people that, the sellers of that house then were also buying something else that we had for sale. And we get this offer in on this property, and the offer, again, everything looked great. We had no checklist to speak of, more than like the rudimentary one that most of you guys use, 4 or 6 things to look for when you get an offer kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Well, we accepted it. The agent was great. Okay. Day before closing, we get a call from, it wasn't even from the buyer's agent. It wasn't even from her. It was from the title company or something. The buyer from your transaction domino here, 3 deals back, can't get financing. And we're like, what the hell? What are you talking about? It wasn't contingent on financing. And we have this lender's letter, no contingencies of financing, all this. And title person said, well, I don't know what the heck's going on. So we called the agent. The agent said, oh, no. The financing, the deal wasn't contingent on financing, but the financing was contingent. Pay attention to what I'm telling you guys. The financing was contingent on the sale of their home. And we're going, what the hell are you talking about? So what she did is she pulled a fast one. She didn't make, follow me here, she didn't make the purchase of the property contingent on the sale of a home. She had the lender, his financing, his ability to get them financing was contingent on the sale of their home. So how did she trick us? Because in the lender's letter that the lender created and sent over to us, it said subject to verification of down payment or something to that effect.
Something fairly standard sounding.
Right, exactly. And so the lender's letter looked like all the other lenders' letters we'd ever received. Again, no home sale contingency. And so we thought, well, as right as rain. And then we got into the lender's letter. The lender's letter is where a lot of your problems are hiding because the lenders are going to, most lenders won't spend any time whatsoever on a file working with a buyer until the buyer is in contract on something. That's how they're going to operate. They're not going to pull credit. And they're not going to, sit down and really the lenders, their job is to have as many light pre-qualification questions as possible. And they know that buyer is not going to be serious until the buyer's in contract on something, which means you guys are out there showing properties to buyers that probably can never even perform. That's the unfortunate truth.
Possible.
Because you're working with so our ultimate addendum that we created, which is included in Premier Coaching, is designed not only you send this ultimate addendum over if you're the listing agent, you send it over to the buyer's agent, and the addendum is, let's just say it's great price, everything's great closing date. The seller accepts the offer, all these things are great, but the buyer has to complete addendum, A within 48 hours. And addendum A or 24 hours says it's a actual addendum that the buyer's agent now has to give to the buyer's lender, and the buyer's lender then has to do the verification of the employment, the verification of the down payment, the actual 3-merge credit report, has to verify that they can qualify for the subject property, has to verify all the crap that the lender should have done before that agent was wasting any time with that buyer in the first place. You guys understanding what I'm saying? So that way, when you get that buyer in contract, actually in contract, you take that house off the market, that buyer for sure can perform, which before with those crappy lender letters, you don't even know what you were getting into. Now, on the buyer side of things, let's say you're working with buyers and let's say your skill set's weak. You're now realizing it's not what you thought it was. And you're now realizing you might be working with some buyers that can never perform. Get our ultimate addendum. Find out who their lender is. By the way, you'll find out most of them aren't even really working with lenders. And then have the lender follow your checklist that has to be, when he's going to give you a lender's letter, all the things have been verified and confirmed. So anytime you get a lender's letter, congratulations, Bob and Sally are qualified up for $750,000. Blah, 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 blah. And then the second part, there's all this crafty little lender language. That says subject to the verification of, or subject to them qualifying for the mortgage product that they're trying to apply for. BS. You want none of that in your lender's letter. So if you're talking about why deals are falling apart, it's the lack of skill. It's what Julie and I are trying to express to you. I bet you talking about that transaction is giving you anxiety. Just me.
Totally. As our broker used to say, that's how you learn. You want to do that again?
We should say, though, here's what we did. We ended up putting it back in contract, that house, just so you guys know. And I don't remember I think actually we got lucky and we got another we actually got a
No, you remember how it got more complicated
Did we sell it to Dr. What's his name?
We arranged for him to give a hard money loan, one of the only ones we ever dealt with, to the original buyer who became part of the problem. It was a little first-time buyer. I remember the house on the bottom was like 80 or 85 grand or something.
This was a while ago.
As you go upscale, and we had both sides of the middle and we had both sides of the top. The top house was like $500,000 or something. We had bits and pieces.
Yeah, but we had both sides. So it's 4 transactions. And the last
it was 5 deep.
5 deep. And wasn't the last one our listing in New Albany for like $900,000 or $1 million or something?
Yes. We had like all the money on the line, and we had all these clients. And fortunately, Dr. Palla saved the deal. That's also, and that deal was how we learned about what we just described. It's how we learned how to use hard money lending. It's how we learned to ask, okay, are you, when you say you're not contingent, what does that really mean? So I wanted to clarify one thing that wraps all this together. That ultimate addendum is basically a counteroffer that forces the lender to do the underwriting, which they put off until the buyer gets, whether it's your buyer or somebody else's, until they get through the inspection, because the lender figures they're not going to spend processing time if the deal's going to blow up. That's why they shove it down the line. And this is why you get that 11th hour call, as we did back then. Oh, I'm sorry, your deal's blown up, right? So the doing the checklist that the lender does at the end during underwriting, we're forcing them to do it earlier. So I want to be really clear that there are three levels of going through lending. If somebody says they're pre-qualified, it virtually means nothing. They had a conversation on the phone with Rocket Mortgage or something. Yeah, you should be able to qualify to buy $1 million house. That's it. Pre-approved means they've gone through part of the process. They've asked the questions. Maybe they've started some of the paperwork, but it's still not a done deal. That's when you get the subject to lender letter. That's where most deals happen. Okay. So yes, I'm pursuing financing, but it's not done. Here's my lender letter, right? It's loan commitment that you're striving for, and it's loan commitment that the ultimate addendum
Well,
forces the lender to move faster into.
so the only thing the lender's letter can be a contingent of is going to be appraisal of the subject property. That's it. And if
Or
you
it may say identifying the property because maybe the buyer's not in contract yet. But other
right,
than that, those are the only two things.
that's it. And if it doesn't say that, you got a crappy lender letter who's being, Larry the lazy lender at it again, basically, or old.
Or maybe they just got started and nobody's done their homework yet.
Well, you shouldn't be working
Either
with
way,
them. You shouldn't be working with them if that's the situation. You sure as hell
right.
shouldn't be letting them go on contract in your house. So if you want to know what, in our opinion, what now, so where is this? Is this a problem? Whose this problem is this? It's the agent's problem. Ultimately, it's the agent's problem because the agent shouldn't have been working with buyers who hadn't actually been fully pre-qualified. It's not the lender's problem. It's not the buyer's problem. The
Right.
buyer doesn't know what they did or didn't do right. It's your job to shepherd them through this process. And look, we can go back and forth and all the other reasons that deals are falling apart. Inspections are going to become more and more of an issue. So what you need to do, and again, for the sake of time, it's all in Premier Coaching. If you guys want to learn more about this, just go to premiercoaching.com. And we have all kinds of very in-depth information and checklists that you can be using. But on the on the seller side of things, with contracts falling out because of inspections, you need to maybe have the house pre-inspected and then proof that the repairs were done. That's the easy button. Not every seller is going to agree to that, though. So when you have sellers that won't agree to that, they're probably not that motivated. So you're gonna have to do a little deep diving into it. And if they say, well, I'm not gonna pay for that, what if the house doesn't sell? But they do have motivation, they're just maybe a little tight on cash. You can say, I'll tell you what, you have the house pre-inspected and get all the repairs done, and I will pay for it, and then you can just reimburse me at closing. Or I'm sorry, and I'll reimburse you at closing. So in other words, they're going to pay for it, but you're agreeing to pay the $400 or $500 or whatever the inspection back to them at closing. You guys get what I'm
You can
doing?
figure that out.
It's a risk
I mean, that can be
reversal.
done. Yeah,
Yeah.
and here's the thing. Most home inspections are like $500 to $600 now. But if you have a great relationship with your go-to home inspector, you can do something that's just the major mechanicals because that's the stuff you're going to negotiate anyway. HVAC, plumbing and electric, safety and security like windows, latching and stuff like that. And you can, especially if you do this repetitively with them, some of you guys that are in a lot of production, you can get it done for a lot less.
Yeah. And then you put American Home Shield warranty on it or put some kind of warranty on it so that the
Yep.
seller and all parties are seeing that the house is covered. A good footnote here is you can put American Home Shield warranty on a property while it's for sale before there's even a buyer on it. And then the
Seller's coverage.
seller's coverage. So if you put an American Home Shield warranty on the house while it's for sale, and then have the house pre-inspected, and you find out what repairs are being done, whatever is covered by AHS with a deductible of less than $100, you can have those repairs to the property done ahead of time under the home warranty. Okay. So if you really get into it, this is a skills problem because you guys haven't sold many of you have never sold real estate in a market like this. And I have unfortunate news for you. It's just going to become more so, not because there's necessarily going to be an increase in inventory, but it's because the unsettling or the unrattling or I don't even know what of the expectations of buyers and sellers is going to create a lot of emotional consternation, specifically from sellers. So many of the sellers you guys are coming across have never sold in a market like this. And so their expectation is like the last time they sold when things were selling like hotcakes. So if you're not preparing them with giving them actual market statistic, they need to see the reality of the market. You're assuming that they know, they don't know. And even if they have been reading all the headlines, it's irrelevant to them because their house is obviously worth more than all the other houses for sale, right? I mean, so you got to be taking all this stuff in consideration when you're dealing with sellers and setting the expectations correctly. So as we said at the start, if you want to be successful in selling real estate in a market like this, you have to start on the initial contact. Julie, I know we're buffering because we're in our cabin and there's a dark cloud going over and Starlink is
Storm.
choking on the clouds. But
Yes.
before we sign off for today, you want to say anything else to these guys?
Well, I think you're going to really feel like you've earned your commission. That's for sure. Because now you've got to be careful, more careful than you were before. You can't just say, all right, I'll take the next offer. You have to watch the home inspection. You got to watch the appraisal. You got to watch the financing. You got to know about the lender letter and what's been done and what hasn't been done. And, you can find out in the front end of the deal, or you can find out the hard way at the end or in the middle where it's falling apart on you. So if you are like me, and until I got used to doing this, it was difficult to ask some of these tough questions, like what happens if the house doesn't sell? What happens if you don't get your loan at 6.1%? Because you might hear, no, I'm not going to be able to proceed. That can be scary. But you know what's scarier is counting on that deal closing and finding out it's not the night before closing. That's
And
way
you
worse.
and you are counting on the money to pay bills and stuff like that.
Don't get yourself in that position. And it's not just about you. I feel like I'm very agent centric because that's what we do, right? But think about your clients too. Because if you weren't telling them along the way, hey, are you getting this done? Have you checked on that? Do you know what the deal is with your ratios? Has your lender given you loan commitment yet? If you're not helping them and they get blindsided at closing, do you think they're going to repeat and refer to you? They're not. They're going to blame it on you. It will be your fault.
They're going to not just blame it on you, but they're going to probably hate on you online because after all, you should have
Yeah,
known to tell
it's even
them
worse.
to, you should have had their backs on this issue or that issue. So be very clear. Everything has changed than versus the old market. You have to be when you're. I'll go back to the inspection thing because it's so important. Mr. Seller, we have to have the house pre-inspected. We have to get the repairs done ahead of time. These aren't the scripts, but this is what I need you to be conveying to your sellers, and I'm going to tell you why. Because when the house gets inspected, a lot of times in this market, the buyers and the buyer's agents are using that as an opportunity to renegotiate the contract. So let's say we get it in contract for $750,000 and you're looking forward to your cash at closing that happens in roughly 30 to 45 days after that. But then the house is pre-inspected or house gets inspected and then the buyer figures out that there's a roof leak, the furnace is, 12 years old and it's only supposed to last 15 and a few other things. Hot tub, pool, spa, whatever, all that equipment, it's garbage, all these things, normal stuff that comes up in any home inspection, by the way. So when the buyer then discovers those issues, the home inspector will give them some range of what the repairs will cost or the replacement costs will be. But that buyer every single time is going to choose the most expensive option or they're just going to walk away from the contract. So my strongest advice to you is that we have the house re-inspected. And so let's say that roof repair up there is going to cost $500 to get it fixed now. You got to repair the roof, fix the drywall damage or whatever it is. But if a buyer and a home inspector comes through, that same repair that will cost you $500 today might cost you $5,000, but it probably cost you the deal. So I need you to open your mind to the fact that we need to be prepared for what comes next. And that's, that type of thinking and that approach dealing with your customers has to happen all the way through the transaction. Like when you have a house listed, we want you to call your sellers every single week and we need you to give them updates. We give you the scripts of what to say. It's the 120-day seller
12-week
communication.
seller communication plan.
Can you write that one down too, please?
Mm-hmm.
These are all things that Julie and I are updating with AI,
Polishing
by the
up.
way. Yeah, we're polishing up. My gosh, if you guys aren't using Claude, you're missing the boat. Right?
It's awesome.
Speaking
Yes.
of which, we spent a fair amount of time updating the real estate treasure map, which is the fill in the blank business and life plan. And we had Claude build an interactive version of the book, which is unbelievably cool. So
Mhm.
you can go in there and it's an interactive form. So normally you'd be reading our book and then you'd have worksheets that you'd print out and you'd fill the pages out and then you do the math yourself and all this stuff. Now this new version of the real estate treasure map does it for you automatically. So you can read the book and then in the interactive form, which you could do on your computer or your phone, you can then enter in the information, enter in your all your goals, enter in all the things, and then it's going to output whatever the magic number is, which is the output of the real estate treasure map, which is the number of listings you need at all times to meet or exceed your expectations. We've created the real estate treasure map over 20 years ago, revised it every 18 months or so, always making it better, but never really making it to the point where we wanted it to be interactive. And to make the form interactive, to make the book interactive, I had a quote once, someone wanted $50,000 to code it for us.
Mhm.
What? Not doing that. Now I had Claude do all the revisions and interactive. It made the forum in the book interactive, and it did it in like an hour, maybe a half hour for
And it
free.
did a killer job too.
It's unbelievable. So I'm telling you all this because if you're in Premier Coaching, which virtually all of you are, or if you're part of our EXP Realty group and you get Premier Coaching for free, you want to go into and use the new real estate treasure map. And when you're done, you're going to have this massive sense of relief because you're going to have a complete roadmap of what you should, of all your financial goals and expectations. It really drills down from, okay, what do you owe? What do you want to accomplish? And it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And the output, again, is going to be, I just said it, but I'll say it again, your real estate magic number. And that's the number of listings you need at all times to meet or exceed your financial goals. So for example, if you had 5 listings at all times and you're in a normal market where approximately 2 just of the listings are going to be selling every month and your average commission is $10,000 and you're making $20,000 a month, that's $240,000 a year from having had 5 listings at all times. So guess what your primary focus should be? Building up to and maintaining 5 listings at all times, because then you create duplicatable, predictable cash flow, right? You want to make more money, increase the number of listings you have. We've made being successful in real estate about as simple as you possibly can imagine. First step is going to be to complete your real estate treasure map. So those of you in Premier Coaching, go ahead and get that done. The link is actually, it's been updated on Premier Coaching Level 1. And that goes true for you guys in our EXP Realty group because you're also having free access to Premier Coaching. If you're not in Premier Coaching and you are not interested in EXP, that's great. Just go to premiercoaching.com and join. You do get access to the first level of Premier Coaching, and you do get a daily semi-private coaching call for free for the first 30 days. We know you're going to love the program and stay in, so just keeping that in mind. But if you're in, or if you're ready, if you're in our EXP Realty group, same path forward. If you're ready to upgrade your brokerage experience, or really choosing your first real estate broker, and you want to join Julie and I and partner with Julie and I at EXP Realty, you can text me below at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206, or just click the link in the show description and learn more about our EXP Realty group. And if you aren't able to click and you just want to go to a website, it's whylibertas.com, WHYLIB, B as in Ben, ERTAS.com. And you can learn more about why thousands of agents have partnered with Julie and I at EXP Realty. So Julie, any closing thoughts, or can we sign off?
Don't be lazy about your transactions. They can
That's right.
bite you before you know it. So when in doubt, over communicate, ask lots of great questions, and absolutely pre-qualify. That using the pre-qualification plus the ultimate addendum that you get in Premier Coaching, that will save 95% of your issues.
Exactly. You guys have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow. Hello, thank you for having watched this video. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
That's right. And don't forget to hit that like button, leave your comments and questions below, and we will get right back with you.
Thank you for watching this video. And remember to watch the next one. You're going to love that one.